And right now, the book was written by Sean Deveney, Facing Kobe Bryant. He's covered the NBA for a long, long time, and he joins us now here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. It's a book with players, coaches, broadcasters recalling the greatest player of his generation. Sean, welcome back, pal. How you been?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're doing great, man, and it's great to have you back and talking some hoops as we're right around the trade deadline where we start to heat things up, and then sadly this surreal moment came, and we were doing some research for today's show, and I remember your book and figured, man, this would be a great time to kind of tell the good about what kind of player and what kind of person the other players, the adversaries of Kobe Bryant. Bobby Marks had just told us that when they played the Lakers in the finals, that guys like Jason Kidd, Kenyon Martin, they had a little fear in their eyes because Kobe was that kind of player. And you talked to some of the best in the game when putting this book together.
Yeah, and that was definitely the one of the takeaways is that he did inspire fear. And he did it. Certainly when he was 17, 18, 19, he was maybe a bit of a chest thumper. He looked for that kind of attention. But as he got older, he wasn't. And I talked to Jalen Rose, was one of the guys I spoke with for that book, and one of the things that he said about that 81-point game that he had against Toronto, Jalen was with the Raptors at the time, was that throughout, not once did Kobe pound his own chest. Not once did Kobe go out and do anything that would have drawn extra scrutiny from the Raptors and maybe drawn some hard fouls or anything like that. He scored 81 points without doing that. That he had a way of really getting inside your head and sort of killing you without you even knowing that he was doing it. And that's something that really stood out from the people that I talked to.
Yeah, I mean, you talked to greats, Barkley, Grant Hill, among others, and when you hear it from guys of that caliber, it's not like you're asking a role player, hey, what's it like to go up against Kobe Bryant? You're asking fellow Hall of Famers. I mean, that tells you the uniqueness of this guy's game. But what was something that maybe was unanimous among these great players when talking about Kobe?
I think the way that he trash talked was one of my favorite things, because he didn't do sort of the smack talk. He didn't really get crazy, drop F-bombs, things like that. But he would talk throughout a game. But he would almost do it like a conversation, and he would kind of go through and talk to you and set things up for how the game was going to go and tell you how the game was going to go. And he'd because he knew the triangle offense so well and opponents didn't, he could say, I'm going to go over to that spot by the end of this possession. I'll go to that spot and I'm going to make an 18-footer on you. And again, other players weren't quite as familiar with the triangle and defending it. So he'd go through some different permutations, and sure enough, he'd wind up taking that shot. And that's the kind of trash talker he was. That he didn't really insult you or anything. He just kind of just gradually wore you down over the course of a game. And pretty much everybody I talked to said that.
Sean, while writing this book and interviewing the various players and everyone else that you met with to put this together, facing Kobe Bryant, what's something that the average fan maybe wouldn't know about Kobe Bryant? What's something that maybe raised your eyebrows a little bit, or something that you learned that you didn't?
I would probably say talking to his high school coach, and getting a sense of what he was like in high school, where even at 13 years old, he had a certain drive that other guys didn't have. His high school coach told me that one of the things he used to do, and remember, Kobe's 15, 16 years old at this time, he wasn't as highly rated in all the recruiting rankings as some of the other guys, especially not Vince Carter. And so every time Vince Carter did something, Greg Downer, the coach at Lower Merion, would go to Kobe and say, hey, did you see this? And he, print something out or have some kind of news clip or tell him something that another coach had told him. He said, Vince Carter, he sprained his wrist and scored 39 points and they won. And that would just get right under Kobe Bryant's skin, and he would start to, go out the next day and feel like he had to top what Vince Carter had done down in Florida. And that's the kind of thing that even as a teenage kid, Kobe Bryant had that, and so few people have that, so few athletes have that little extra, that competitiveness that drives them, and even at 15 he had that.
So I know you covered the NBA for a while. So how does this moment and his tragic passing compare to some of the shockwave moments that we've seen in the NBA throughout the years, whether it's Magic Johnson, admission of having AIDS, or anything that's gone on, Donald Sterling? I mean, there've been a lot of different types of ways that the NBA world has been shaken up, and I feel like this one might be right up there, if not number one, the way it happened, especially.
I think the two that you mentioned are the only ones that I could really compare it to, where everything that happened before was one thing and then everything happened afterwards was different, where everything changed after it. Certainly Magic Johnson was one of those cases. But you mentioned Donald Sterling, and more recently, that's probably the story that I would compare it to, that after Donald Sterling, everything in the NBA did change, and there was sort of a difference in terms of how owners were looked at, how relationships with players and all that sort of stuff, how all those things were looked at. I think those are probably the only two stories that I can compare it to. And I don't know how to answer the question because I'm not done processing it. I don't think anybody is.
No doubt.
To see exactly where all this lands and what happens in the NBA, and what changes they make, whether it's retiring 24 across the board, something like that. It's hard to see how all this is going to wind up shaking out in the NBA.
Do you think the NBA will do something? We were talking about how he made 18 All-Star games, which is just unbelievable, and won a slam dunk contest. I mean, they could literally name the All-Star weekend after him. They could name the trophy after him. I've seen it out there that they should change the logo to something with him on it instead of Jerry West. Do you think the NBA will do something kind of earth-shattering that involves commemorating Kobe?
Yeah, I do. I don't think that this is a time for half measures. I think that this is a time to do something maybe a little bit bold. And I think the logo thing, especially while Jerry West is still alive, you get his blessing and you get him, being the one to announce it. Then that takes that sort of makes it appropriate, and that makes it something I think that everybody would nod and say, yeah, that's the right thing to do. I think the logo thing, I wouldn't be surprised if the NBA did that. I can't say for sure that it's something that the league will pull the trigger on, but I think that's all things considered. Especially the relationship Kobe had with Jerry West, and the fact that Jerry West is alive and sort of blessed the thing. To me, that would be the most appropriate thing the league could do.
Sean Deveney's with us. The book is called Facing Kobe Bryant, and obviously, was he an unlikely? Some people would say he's the greatest player of the generation. How unlikely was that? And that a lot of guys that you talked to also played against Michael Jordan. Was there a lot of references to, I had mentioned earlier, like if Kobe came before Jordan, we might say Kobe as the guy. It's just that he came after Jordan, so Jordan kind of gets that hat tip as the first guy. But how similar did these greats feel that these two guys were?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Kobe emulated him and tried to mimic a lot of the things that Jordan did, and you can argue whether he ever really got there or anything like that, and that's fine. I don't think now's really the time to do that, but I think that the similarities between the two guys were obvious. I think the most striking similarity, and the thing that most people would tell you who knew both guys, is the work ethic. Michael Jordan had probably more natural talent than Kobe Bryant, and Bryant was certainly very, very talented naturally. But both of those guys, what they did was they wrung every bit of production possible out of the talent that they had. And that's something that really does set them apart. That, you could look at a guy, whether it's Tracy McGrady or somebody like that, and say, he probably had more natural talent than those guys, but did not put in the work that those guys put in, and that's what really separated them. So as similar as their playing styles were, I think the work ethic with both guys is what really set them apart within their generation, and is really part of the legacies that both of those guys have left behind.
Sean, if you had to describe Kobe Bryant's legacy in a couple words, what would that be?
Ooh. I would say ambassador of the game. That's probably the biggest loss that we're going to have going forward with Kobe Bryant. As much as he's been such an exemplary father, and the way that he died kind of shows that. As much as he's been, getting involved in the movie industry, and there was the Dear Basketball movie, and he won an Oscar and things like that. All that stuff aside, he was still a great ambassador for the game. At the World Cup this summer in China, it was him. He was there. He was the one who was representing American basketball. He traveled all. If you look at the memorials that are being erected around the world right now, there's a gym in Kobe Bryant in Manila in the Philippines called the House of Kobe Bryant, and it's because he visited there in 2016, and so they built a whole gym in his honor. And if you look at Italy, the Italian league is having a moment of silence before all of their games this week because he grew up in Italy and was a frequent visitor and did a lot for Italian basketball. So you go right through, and it wasn't just the NBA that's losing something. It wasn't just the Lakers. It wasn't just the USA. It was really the whole country, the whole world. Had a claim to Kobe Bryant and had a claim to him really as a global ambassador of the game.
Yeah, Sean, and we'll leave you with the fact that you talk to such high profile players for this. Of those high profile players, was there one that maybe even made you raise your eyebrow that a player of that magnitude thought what they thought about Kobe Bryant?
Probably my favorite one is actually a coach. And it's a story that Doc Rivers tells about the 2008 NBA Finals. And what he said was, if you remember Game 6, when the Celtics played the Lakers, Boston was up 3-2. They crushed them in Game 6. It was over at halftime. They were up by 30 points in the fourth quarter, and excuse me, sorry. They were up by 30 points in the fourth quarter, and the Lakers still had Kobe Bryant on the floor. And so 4 minutes to go, Doc Rivers still has Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce still on the floor. And sure enough, one of the assistants for the Celtics goes to Doc Rivers, hey, we should probably get those guys off. And he pointed to Kobe Bryant and said, as long as he's still on the floor, I'm keeping those guys on the floor. So, that sort of sums up how Kobe Bryant was viewed.
Yeah, and then obviously here in the Philly area, I mean, I've been played here in high school, and then he goes pro. The amount of stuff that he accomplished, and then to have LeBron pass him in Philly, I mean, just a surreal moment that happened on Saturday night, and then to hear what LeBron said after that game, and just his connection with his hometown was kind of unique as well. Yeah,
and it continued. He always went back to his high school. Obviously he donated $400,000 for them to build the gym in 2010, and he would go back every year, and he would see them, and he would bring equipment and for both basketball teams. He very much kept up his connection, especially to his high school, but to the Philly area in general.
Sean Deveney, if you want to check out the book, it's called Facing Kobe Bryant. You can get it on Amazon and just Google that, Facing Kobe Bryant. Sean, an excellent account of what others thought, players, coaches, adversaries playing against Kobe. And Sean was kind enough to join us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks so much, Sean.
Okay, thanks for having me, guys.